Hold on tight for the next hour. You're entering into a place, a zone called the alternative to the alternative media. It's a place, a special place where even truth seekers fear to tread.
All right, people, let's move like we've got a purpose.
Affirmative.
Okay, welcome back to the Investigative Journal on this Monday. What day is it? It's March 19th already, 2018. Day on our calendar, and we're here again to talk about the Vatican-led New World Order. Before I do that, I did want to mention, go to my website at greganthonysjournal.wordpress.com, and you can get shows over a decade regarding the Vatican-led New World Order. And if you don't know what that is, boy, you better keep reading. You better keep studying, because the New World Order is here and it's in full swing right now. Wars on the horizon, the dollar shaky as can be. And you know what? There's a lot more to this than just thinking about your political system. It goes deeper and deeper and deeper the more you get into it. And today I was listening a bit to a Trump news conference, not a news conference, he was giving a speech regarding the opioid crisis. And he was decrying on Americans, and he's going to do this and that to stop drugs coming into this country. And I had to laugh, because the very same organization that he works for, the United States government, they bring in the drugs here so they can dope the people. And they use the Jesuit order to help them, of course. They all work together. Remember the interview I did with, it was the godson of Tony Gambino, of the Gambino crime family? He said the three organizations that profit the most are out of the drug trade is the Vatican, the United States government, and the mafia bosses. And of course the cartels who work together with all of them. So to get a little bit deeper, so I'm listening to this and I'm going, isn't this what they do all the time? They create the problem, then they have to get on TV and try to give you a solution for it. And of course, that's going to cost a lot of money, and they raise a lot of money. And then the real problem is that the drug problem always gets worse, doesn't it? Continues to get worse. Worse and worse and worse. The more they try to help, the more it gets worse, because really, it's a business. And they want to dope the world. That's the whole key. And when you start looking at what's behind the drug trade, when you start understanding that the real push to figure out a way to get money to fund these covert operations all around the world, when they had the Sandinistas, and then when they have the revolutionary groups in the foreign countries, and now to fund all of the terror groups all over the world, they need money. And how are they going to get that? Well, right after World War II, the CIA, which was then called the OSS, was sitting with Hitler's main man, that was Pope Pius XII. They're in Rome. And Wild Bill Donovan was one of them, sitting with the Pope, and they were trying to figure out, well, now that World War II is over, how are we going to fund, this fight against communism? The communism that we created. And if you don't believe they created it, look to the Paraguay experiments, the Paraguay reductions in the 1600s. And it was a Jesuit-run operation in Paraguay that was basically there to mastermind communism, to practice it, and then to put it into play in Russia, what they did. So they're sitting there, Wild Bill Donovan, one of them, and Pope Pius XII, and they're trying to figure out a way to raise money so they can fund their upcoming revolutions to fight against communism and create these covert, they have to have a war, the good guys against the bad guys. And guess what? They're thinking, they look to China. And there was a battle between Chiang Kai-shek and Mao Zedong. And what Chiang Kai-shek decided to do was, boy, how are we going to raise money for this battle? So what he did is they created the poppy fields, the opium, and the heroin, and they grew it and then sold it through basically cartels and through the government operatives so that they could drug their own people and raise the money. And then, of course, they'd have to put it in places that no one would know where it's going, money laundering. And, boy, a bell rang, just like the one you heard just a couple seconds ago. And they said, why don't we do what Chiang Kai-shek did? And so they did. What they did is they created in Burma the growing fields. And for years, they made fortunes off. So they would grow and protect the heroin and the poppy fields. They would collect and then they would gather groups to sell it. And they would take a cut. And they were making millions and millions of dollars by the hour off of this. And that was giving them the money to fund these wars and, this communistic war. They were going to have to fight, creating rebel groups to fight back and forth. And one problem was, well, where are we going to put all this money? So they had to money launder it because they couldn't go through the proper channels in government. In the United States, somebody would catch on. So they began to launder through the Vatican Bank. And then once it got washed right through that bank, there's no oversight to it. We've done many shows on that. Then the money comes out clean as a whistle. And there they go. The money starts pumping into all these different groups to fund their wars. Now, the same thing happened. You wonder, why have they been in Afghanistan so long? Well, the Burma poppy fields went dry. Yep, Mother Nature backfired. They didn't basically have weather manipulation like they do today. Otherwise, they would have said, rain, 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 right there. Well, anyway, there was a problem in Burma. They couldn't grow and that really cut into their pocketbook. So they had to find another place. And they found a place in Afghanistan. And that's why we've been there so long. Because we're doing the same thing there. And that's just one of the places they do it. So then they use the other cartels working together to create enough money to not only drug populations, but to really make a fortune off of it. And of course, the political people have to come out like Trump did today and say, oh, we're trying to find a solution. Remember, every president I've ever lived under is always saying we're fighting a war on drugs. And it never ends. Everything is a war against something. But the thing they don't tell you is they create the wars. Exactly. So we always have to look deeper, don't we? We can't just look to Trump. We can't just look to your favorite political ally on the left or the right or whatever country you live in. You got to look deeper. Who is really behind the scenes here? And I say that who's got more expertise in all of these things? It's the Vatican along with their henchmen, the Jesuits, who have been controlling and manipulate societies for hundreds, thousands of years. Now, if you don't believe me, the Vatican itself has about 195, going on 200 concordats around the world. That are legal agreements with countries. And boy, it's you pat me my back and I'll scratch your back. And the Vatican makes a fortune off of this, working not only with communist people, dictators, ruthless dictators. They'll work with anybody that's got money, including democracies. They don't care. And so we have to look, what is the society of Jesus? And the one thing we do on this show is sometimes we go back and try to explain it to you, because there are many people out there who don't know who they are. So these are the 10 facts that I think are important to know about the Jesuits, and you can find many, many more. And I think by doing this, you'll get an idea that you got to go to the source. You got to cut the head of the snake off if you want not to get poisoned. All right? Now, remember in Matthew 7:15, Beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravenous wolves. And isn't that the truth? Now, the Society of Jesus, it's more commonly referred to as the Jesuits. Isn't it amazing how they take this kind of name and they're just the opposite, you know? They're just the opposite. They don't follow Jesus at all or his principles. They do, on the surface they do. But behind the scenes, they're as ruthless as they come. And really, they're an armed militia, the Roman Catholic Church. They were sanctioned, we go back to 1540, by Pope Paul Pope Paul III, with one mandate, to defeat Protestantism and regain worldwide papal rule. And, to achieve this task, they employ every adapting methods of education, social programs, wickedness, killings, infiltration. Anything goes, so to speak. Needless to say, they are achieving great success in their mission as we speak today, which is climaxing with the present Pope, a Jesuit, the first Jesuit Pope, Pope Francis. The eighth and last Pope, some people say, of Revelation 17. Now, is that true? Are there going to be any more popes? Well, what if he died tomorrow? I guess there would be. And there's another one out there, right? We got two now. We got Pope Ratzinger. He's walking around the Vatican, with his homosexual friends. And, Francis held some of the highest positions in Argentina, and was involved in some really crazy and evil things there when you look at his background. Now, most people today are oblivious, have no idea how the Jesuits operate. And from their inception to this very day, now more than ever, the world's last chance, basically, it's important to bring up these historical facts about this evil society and to expose them as much as we can, because there aren't many people doing it. And folks, it is not in the minds of the mainstream media or much of the alternative media who works for them to ever get to the bottom of this. They're going to lead you down some other path. That's why it's important to come to this show. And we're going to come back with the 10 facts right after this brief message that I'm going to give. It's regarding hemp for health and wealth. And join the hemp revolution. If you haven't tried it, please do. It's helped me over the last month or two, and it's made me feel a lot better. And I know it'll do the same for you. And if you want to also sell the product, make some extra money, it's tough these days, and you can work right from home with your internet. And you can sell hemp. It's legal in all 50 states, Mexico and Canada. And you can make yourself a good buck doing it. So contact me, Greg Anthony, at gregbeacon@gmail.com. That's GregBeacon.com. That's gregbeacon@gmail.com. Okay, back to the 10 facts that you should know about the Jesuit. My God, there's a lot more than 10, but I'll get into those right now. The first one, and I'm taking this from a prophecy website to put together some of these facts, and I'm adding a couple myself, but they're quite interesting. First, this one I've always put at the top, and I'm going to tell you why, because many people have gotten the wrong impression of really what happened here. And even these people will explain it, and I'm going to explain it a little further to give you a better insight, because I believe it's one of the most important times in history, and the Jesuits, and how they infiltrated America, along with what was happening here. Now, Pope Clement XIV abolished the Jesuits as a society in 1773, and I always ask this, how come we know so little about their activities when you read American history books? All you get is kind of a outline of what was going on, kind of a whitewashed version of what they want to tell you about the American Revolution and the formation of this country. And on the public record, here's what let me read to you what they say on this website. Then let me give you another alternative to think about. To know how deep this goes, this is what you have to do sometimes. Now, it didn't take long for the 18th century Catholic nations to get tired of meddling of the Jesuits into their national affairs. They were so infuriated against the Jesuits that they demanded the Roman Catholic Church abolish them once and for all. Sufficient political pressure was brought to bear on Pope Clement XIII. However, he passed away before he could do anything about it. The task of abolishing the Society of Jesus then fell on his successor, Clement XIV. As Clement XIV signed the decree abolishing the order, he said, "I have signed my death warrant." With 9 months, he was dead. Many contemporaries considered his death a case of poisoning and suspected the Jesuits were responsible. Okay. Isn't it interesting that they were abolished in 1773, right before the United States officially got going, right? Right before the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution was signed. And I believe there's a lot more to this. I don't think on the surface, publicly they were abolished, but I believe that they got even stronger and purposely abolished themselves. And what I mean by that is the Jesuit general at the time, and I've talked about this just last week again, because I think it's so important. The Jesuit general back then, Lorenzo Ricci, supposedly was then jailed and died in prison. Now, I don't believe there's a good possibility, if you look at certain facts, that he never went to prison, and in fact ended up in America as a traveling professor that met with the founding fathers. Now you say, Greg, that's crazy. No, it's not. Because what happened in Portugal right before that told me perhaps Ricci and the Vatican worked together to bring about their own demise so that their detractors, their enemies, would lower their guard, thinking, well, if the Jesuits are no longer around, we have nothing to worry about. And many in America felt that way. They heard the story, and they knew how formidable of an enemy the Jesuits were. So by actually disbanding them, they created an advantage. They could work behind the scenes covertly to get what they wanted done in America, and then to grow. Once they got their feet in the door of their prized possession, America, they could grow into the great organization they say they are today. And boy, do they, bar none, the Vatican and the Jesuits are the richest organization in the world. Now, so Ricci goes to Portugal. There was a Jesuit priest. Let me see how much time I got. I don't want to run out of time here. Okay, there was a Jesuit high-level priest who was brought up on charges of embezzlement and a whole bunch of things. And instead of Ricci coming to his aid, he came to Portugal and told the whole court exactly what they wanted to hear. He opened up their sordid books showing the Jesuits were involved in assassinations, were involved in covert actions. Why would he do that? Well, it gave more emphasis in the countries of Europe to expel them and to also get rid of them, which he wanted. Why? He was following the great Sun Tzu art of war. Make your enemy feel you're weak, you have a better chance to succeed. And isn't it interesting that the Jesuits were the first to publish Sun Tzu's art of war in French earlier, right before that time in the 1700s? Oh, quite interesting. Some say they even wrote it. Because if you check Chinese records, it's really hard to even find a general by the name of Sun Tzu. So, by actually creating their own demise, not dying in that prison, because there was a professor that showed up, and there's records of it, right around the time of the signing of the Declaration of Independence, who met with Franklin and Jefferson and all these people. And he was kind of the guiding light, and perhaps he was the guy who really was the mastermind between putting together the American Revolution. pitting England against France to create this country, so for one reason, so they could get in under the guise of freedom of religion. And look how they've grown since. The only problem is, once they get powerful, there isn't going to be any freedom of religion in this country. And you're seeing that today. Why is there such an attack on Christianity here? You ever seen a bigger attack behind the scenes? Unreal. And that's exactly what they're doing. So this fact is important. Read and understand why they were abolished, if they were, who was behind it, and did they really abolish themselves to get a greater gain and to allow their enemies at the time to lower their guard. Good possibility. Okay, we've got about 3 minutes here. And I did want to say, before we get into the second fact, which I'll get into after the break, that you got to know, there's a lot of you out there in small business or medium business who really are thinking, wow, this is a tough chore. How did I ever get involved? I can't get money. All of a sudden something happens. One of your equipment breaks. You have an untimely accident in your store. Something goes on. There's a flood. There's something. And you are stuck. Revenue's not coming in. You need money. So what do? You go to your local bank. And your banker doesn't even know your name anymore. Now back maybe 50, 60 years ago in America, you could go into the store and on your name alone, get your money. And the bank would pay, then you'd pay back the bank and everybody's happy. But today it doesn't work that way. Most small businesses and medium businesses can't get loans from traditional banks. So what's happened is there's companies out there, private people, who want to help you, give you an unsecured loan and help you stay in business. And they will do that. And I'm telling you, I know a good company that you can work with, that 98% of the small and medium businesses that apply get their loan. So they get their pizza maker if they need it. If they need a pizza oven and they can't afford it, they get it. And there's no questions asked. Use the money for what you want, keep your business going, and 98% of the people get funded within 5 to 7 days. Unheard of. So if you want to apply, contact me, Greg Anthony, at Greg Beacon, that's GregBeacon, at gmail.com. That's Greg Beacon at gmail.com, and we'll see if you can get you funded, because we need small business and medium businesses in America to prosper and grow. And sometimes you wonder why you did it when you can't even get money from your local bank who's giving all the money to these rich guys who don't need it. Isn't that amazing? Well, anyway, go to gregbeacon at gmail.com and we'll see if we can get your small businesses funded. And one thing before we go, before the break, I did mention earlier in the show that I presented that commercial on hemp, and I really think it could help you out. So if you really want to boost, you really want to see if you can help your health, because you're nothing without it, nothing without your health, go to my website at greganthonysjournal.wordpress.com, and you'll see shows I've done on this product, hemp oils, as well as advertisements there, and it'll show you how to get involved, either buying it or selling it. You can sell it to your friends and make some good money. Contact me, again, at Greg Beacon, that's GregBeacon at gmail.com. Don't hesitate, really, because you know what? You snooze and you lose. So contact me on both those things. If you're a small business, need money, if you want to try a product that'll help you feel better, help your health, contact me. Back in 3 minutes on The Investigative Journal.
The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. You will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on internet. or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. If some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis, as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our listen and schedule pages on the internet. Then, when you subscribe, we will send you the last quarterly MP3 CD of that program immediately, and continue to do so with each new quarter. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe, so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening. Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased, it has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity, invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host Melody Cedarstrom right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free 1-800-375-4188.
Hi, Greg Anthony here from the Investigative Journal, and I've never steered you wrong before when it comes to talking about the truth regarding your political and social worlds you live in. And I don't plan on steering you wrong today when I say get involved in the hemp revolution. Hemp for health and wealth. I know of some of the best hemp oils on the market. If you haven't tried them, you have to. And pay attention, they're lab tested. So contact me, Greg Anthony, at gregbeacon@gmail.com. That's Greg Beacon, G-R-E-G, like boy, E-A-C-O-N.com. And I'll hook you up with some of the best hemp products on the market. And if you want to become a sales associate and make some money selling hemp to your friends and family, do that. Contact Greg Anthony at the Investigative Journal, gregbeacon@gmail.com, gregbeacon@gmail.com.
The following program is labeled dangerous and off limits by the supreme Jesuit command. But stand tall, people. Listen up, and you may just learn something.
Oh, dear Lord Jesus, this ain't happening, man. This can't be happening, man. This isn't happening.
Okay, let's get right back to the show. We're talking about 10 good facts you need to know about the Jesuits. Many people have always asked, why do you cover this story? We don't hear much about it in the mainstream. And we don't even hear about it on the alternative media, Alex Jones and the rest of those people. And I say because they are probably either working for them, oblivious of the truth, and you'll never get it. You'll never get the straight and narrow, the history you need, and everything else you need to understand this story. I've over the years tried to bring on as many people that know much more about it than me on this show, showing you example after example. But you know what happens? Many people, especially millennials and younger people in this country, go on and play their video games or start thinking that they know what's really happening in the world and they're going to solve the political problems. Now, unfortunately, it hasn't worked ever in history, and it's not going to work anymore today. Because you really have to understand the story before anything can happen. Now, people say, well, once you understand it, how can we change it? let's get 1 million people together and march on Washington. Folks, that's not going to work. Nothing like that will work. The only way it'll work is it'll help you individually. And individually, you can help another person and another person. And whether the New World Order rolls on, and it most likely will, at least you've understood what they are doing and you're smarter and a better person for it. And whether you believe in the afterlife or you don't, wouldn't you rather leave this earth knowing you did everything you can to figure out why you were put here? And you don't have to spend your whole life doing it. I mean, you can live an actually normal life by understanding this, because you know when you walk out into reality that it's not reality. And what I mean by that is they've created a fictitious world. Everything you're living in is orchestrated. And I mean everything from every step you take on this earth and everything you look up in the sky has been manipulated for you to think in terms of what they want you to understand. And once you start breaking those chains, whether it be from the world you live in to the financial world that you have to be involved in, the spiritual world, once you start breaking all these chains, you start really living a better life. Now, when I first started doing this, I thought, just like many people, God, if everybody understood this story, the world would be different. The problem is, I don't think it's meant for everyone. And what do I mean by that? Look, certain people you're going to have to understand are never, ever going to go to this area, go to this way of thinking, go deep enough to find out, because what they're going to do is take the easy way out, rely on what they see on TV, read in the newspapers or whatever. And that's just the way it is. And unfortunately, the majority of the people are like that. But if you're one of the few that ever get to understand this stuff, you're going to be a better person for it. And that's why we keep doing it on this show. I still, over the years, get people coming out of the woodwork who'll email me and say, boy, thanks a lot for doing those shows. And even though the percentages aren't as, it's not going to be 300 million people on Twitter, but what it is one by one, you'll see that, as far as I'm concerned, the Vatican and the Jesuits are at the top of the heap when it comes to the New World Order and what's been going on in the world for thousands of years, and you really have to understand it. The Vatican's been around a long time, the Jesuits since 1540, and they haven't been doing anything much good since their inceptions. So anyway, let's talk about some of these facts that you may not understand about the very organization we are talking about. Now, one of them, fact 2, is no other entity on earth has been expelled or suppressed by Catholic and non-Catholic countries as the Jesuits. Now, in fact 1, we talked about how they may have created their own demise in the first fact we just discussed on the other side of the break. But what about their suppression? Now, obviously, the Jesuits were not expelled from many nations because of their educational charity work. They were expelled for engaging in and carrying out subversive political plots against humanity to advance their own cause. Between 1555 and 1931, the Society of Jesus, the Jesuit order, has been expelled from 83 countries, city-states, and cities for engaging in political intrigue and subversion plots against the welfare of the state. According to the records of a Jesuit priest of repute, Thomas J. Campbell, practically every instance of expulsion was for political intrigue, political infiltration, political subversion, and inciting to political insurrection. Now, with that in mind, folks, what do you think they're doing here in America? Just charity work? Educational work? I don't think so. It's a good front. But I think they're doing the same exact thing they were doing in these 83 countries they were expelled from. They're known for what? Deception, spying, infiltration, assassination, and revolution. Boy, they like revolution. They work deep into a political field and plotted through politics throughout the world countries. They're doing it today, just as they have for hundreds of years. And you can get that from the Babington Plot by J.E.C. Shepard, page 12. Now, when the Jesuits are expelled from a country, they just don't go away. They just change their strategy and return to the country they were expelled from under a new disguise. The following sums up some of their operational strategies. We came in like lambs and will rule like wolves. We shall be expelled like dogs and return like eagles. That's from Francisco Borgia, 3rd Jesuit Superior General. Fact number 3. Now, this is one we've talked about. Boy, in fact, I don't talk about it much more because I said, how many times do I have to say this? Hitler modeled his dreaded SS Army and party after the organizational structure of who? The Jesuits and the Roman Catholic Church. The SS organization had been constituted according to the principles of the Jesuit order. Hitler said that himself. He's been quoted as saying that. And you can find some of those quotes in The Secret History of the Jesuits by Edmund Paris, start on page 164. Now, Walter Schellenberg, former chief of the Nazi counterespionage, made this statement. Okay? High-level figure in the Nazis. Now, when people say, oh, Hitler was controlled by the Vatican, people say, you're crazy. Well, am I? Here's what Schellenberg said. The SS organization had been constituted by Himmler, Heinrich Himmler, leading member of the Nazi Party, according to the principles of the Jesuit order. Now, where did he get these principles, I ask? From working with them. Their regulations and spiritual exercises prescribed by Ignatius Loyola were the model Himmler tried to copy exactly. Himmler's life as the supreme chief of the SS was to be the equivalent of the Jesuit general, and the whole structure was as close imitation of the Catholic Church's hierarchy order. And you can find that in The Secret History of the Jesuits by Edmund Paris. Now, above all, I have learned from the Jesuits, and so did Lenin too. This is Schellenberg talking. Far as I recall, the world had never known anything quite so splendid as the hierarchical structure of the Catholic Church. There were quite a few things I simply appropriated from the Jesuits for the use of the party. Now, source is Manfred Barthel, The Jesuits, History and Legend of the Society of Jesus, New York, 1984. Adolf Hitler, page 266. Okay, so people say, when I get on this subject, they say, oh, well, this happened in Europe. Nothing like that goes on here. Okay, let's look at one little story I like to talk about. Now, do you know where Georgetown University is? And you know that was the first Jesuit university in America. It's right next to the White House. And I say there's a little secret tunnel between the two buildings where they get together. I have not been able to prove that, and I've had some fun with that story over the years. But from Georgetown University, there is such a thing called the School of Foreign Service. And that goes on to this day. And to this day, most of our diplomats are trained there. Trained in Jesuitical thinking. Now, who formed that School of Foreign Service? It was an educator at Georgetown named Father Edmund Walsh. Now, Father Edmund Walsh passed away and is no longer with us, but he was very close to Eisenhower and many of the generals in World War II, and was instrumental in making sure that Eisenhower became the head of was the top general in World War II and then became president. Now, Edmund Walsh is featured on President Eisenhower's website to this day, and you can go see that. And there's a page on Edmund Walsh on a presidential website. And he was honored in the Rose Garden after he died. Now, I called Georgetown years ago and asked, I said, well, who is this priest, Judge Edmund Walsh? And their explanation, he was a great educator. And I was thinking, why would a great educator, there are many great educators, why is he on a presidential website, and why is he close to all these generals and really a confidant of some of the highest people in Washington? And the reason that I said that is because I started to think, wow, this is a great story. There's got to be a lot to this Edmund Walsh. And sure enough, there is. When you start checking out Edmund Walsh, although you're not going to read about it in the history books, Edmund Walsh, we'll start out with the big one. He led a group to Russia during the Bolshevik Revolution, and the guise was that they were bringing about aid, food aid, money and food to the poor in Russia because of the revolution going on. Now, when you look a little bit deeper, Walsh was given a blank check, and his job as kind of a agent of the government, easily getting into Russia under the guise of being a benevolent priest. And his role was to make sure that Joseph Stalin was allowed into the leading headquarters and become one of the top leaders in the Bolshevik Revolution alongside Lenin. Now, Lenin wasn't too pleased with that idea, and the only thing that made Lenin change his mind was that Walsh had a blank check of Western money to fund the Bolshevik Revolution. And so, with that, Lenin allowed Stalin in, and the rest is history. Stalin becoming the greatest mass murderer in history, 30 to 40 million Orthodox Christians killed there. Working as a Jesuit, I call him Father Joseph Stalin. He was trained at Tiflis, a Jesuit institution in Russia, and he was always given asylum there when he was hunted down in the early days by the authorities in Russia. So Joseph Stalin, a Jesuit priest, he spent years there. Many say he became one and then went undercover. And Walsh's job was to bring in Western money, make sure that Stalin got in. In fact, Lenin was then killed, remember? So, Edmund Walsh, Georgetown University. So when you say this is just a European deal and the Jesuits here are different in America, forget about it. It's not the truth. Now, Walsh was also he was in Iraq for many years prior to Saddam Hussein and everything, and that's an interesting story. So Mr. Walsh was more or less a spy, CIA operative, covering as a priest, and starting the School of Foreign Service, where many of our diplomats are trained today, to make sure that it goes on to this day. And also, for that, he was giving honor at the White House. And when you try to get this story from Georgetown, that's not what you're going to hear. But anyway, Edmund Walsh. It's a name to remember. Okay, so fact number 3, we're looking at this. Let's look at what Hitler said. He said, I learned much from the order of the Jesuits. Until now, Hitler, saying himself, there has never been anything more grandiose on the earth than the hierarchical organization of the Catholic Church. I transferred much of this organization into my own party. I'm going to let you in on a secret. I am founding an order. In my burghs of an order, we will raise up a youth which will make the world tremble. Hitler then stopped saying that he couldn't say any more. Well, remember Hitler's youth? Who was a member of that? Remember Mr. Ratzinger, one of the popes still alive? Well, you can get that from Hermann Rauschning, former National Socialist chief of the government of Danzig. Hitler's Mod Dit, and then that's a book in German with the translations of exactly what he said about the Jesuit order. Now, it goes on to say the Fuhrer had come to power thanks to the votes of the Catholic Center Party, overseen by Jesuit Ludwig Klaas, only 5 years before 1933. But most of the objectives cynically revealed in Mein Kampf were already realized. This book was written by the Jesuit-controlled Father Bernhard Stempfel and signed by Hitler, for it was the Society of Jesus which perfected the famous Pan-German program, as laid out in this book, and the Fuhrer endorsed it. Now, I'm a simple guy. Where are the people that research these things? Where are the House investigators from the House and the Senate? Where are the CIA? Where are the FBI trying to protect our country from these traitors? Right. That's what they are. That's what Edmund Walsh would be. Now, tell me why they're allowed in America when they are funding and helping our enemy in Germany at the time. Why are they still here? Because the House and the Senate and our government work with them. That's why they're here. There's no other explanation for it. So what happens is they don't want you to read these things. And then when you get them from sources like me or other people, you don't want to believe them because you say that can't be the way it is. And everybody gets screwed in the end. Is really what happens. Now, Franz von Papen, another powerful Nazi, who was instrumental in setting up the Concordat between Germany and the Vatican, had this to say. And that Concordat has never been ended in Germany, by the way. The Third Reich is the first world power which not only acknowledges but also puts into practices the high principles of the papacy. And they're allowed to be in America while Hitler is ravaging Jews and everything and our enemy. But of course, none of these people in America ever get tried for treason, do they? So, I'm looking at a picture here. The signing of the Concordat between Germany and the Vatican from Cardinal Pacelli, later to become Pope Pius XII. By 1933, he was the Vatican Secretary of State. Second from the left, you see Franz von Papen, a sinister Nazi and devout Roman Catholic, who was Hitler's ace diplomat and the Vatican's agent in helping to bring Hitler to power. Standing at the far right of this picture, you will see the little-known Vatican prelate Montini, to become Pope Paul the Sixth. So we got another one there. Okay. Now, fact number 4. How much time do we have left? About 5 minutes. 4 minutes. Agents of the Jesuits have been responsible for assassinating so many heads of state over the centuries it'll make your head spin. Heads of state were assassinated by Jesuits when they attempted to suppress the influence and meddling of the Jesuits. So if you want to, what do you think people in America don't talk about them? They'll get killed. And once you get into the Senate or Congress, you'll find that out. And some of them have been killed. Maybe Paul Wellstone from Minnesota, Senator Wellstone. Maybe Sonny Bono. Who knows? But meddling of the Jesuits in their national affairs is a death sentence. Of heads of state that are known to have been assassinated, now these are the only ones known. William of Orange, King Henry III and Henry IV of France, Tsars Alexander I and II of Russia, President Abraham Lincoln and John F. Kennedy, and Mexican President Benito Pablo Juarez. Yep. Benito, and in fact, today is a holiday representing Benito Pablo Juarez, in Mexico. Those are just some of them known. There's others we've talked about in this show. And it doesn't stop with just Lincoln and Kennedy in America. Abraham Lincoln, he was fully aware, we've talked about this many times, of the Jesuits. He stated, "It is not only against the Americans of the South alone I am fighting. It is more against the Pope of Rome, his perfidious Jesuits, and their blind and bloodthirsty slaves that we have to defend ourselves." And that was in Charles Chiniquy's 50 Years in the Church of Rome. And he also said it would seem that the Jesuits had it in mind from the beginning of the war, the American Civil War of 1861 to 65, to find an occasion for the taking of the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. Now that was from Thomas M. Harris. He was the U.S. Army Brigadier General at the time, author of the book Rome's Responsibility for the Assassination of Abraham Lincoln. Now why do we just forget about these great patriots? Yes, what senator or congressman would ever make that public statement? None. Because it would be their death sentence. Now, the favored policy of the Jesuits is assassination. That's Thomas Harris speaking, former U.S. Army Brigadier General. And he wrote that book. Let's see, when did he write it? That was in 1897, page 19. It is of the faith that the Pope has the right of deposing heretical and rebel kings. Monarchs so disposed by the Pope are converted into notorious tyrants and may be killed by the first who can reach them. If the public cause cannot meet with its defense in the death of a tyrant, it is lawful for the first who arrives to assassinate him. And that was said by Jesuit Suarez in the book number 4, chapter 4, page 13 and 14. Now, Donald Fried remembers what apparently passes for polite conversation when men such as William Colby and Ray Klein get together. And here's what. It was quite bizarre, Fried said, for the subject they chose was, when is it acceptable to assassinate a head of state, Colby presented. And what he said was a theological and philosophical sound approach. The Catholic Church, he said, had long since wrestled with this question and had, to Colby's mind, emerged with the sound concept. It is acceptable. This is William Colby, a high-level diplomat, and high-level politician in our country. It is acceptable, he said, to assassinate a tyrant. Donald Fried is a friend of the author Mark Lane. He organized a conference at USC for the U.S. intelligence community and its critics to meet. In the panel were Lane, Ellsberg, and John Gerassi, all critics. On the other side were William Colby, former DCI Director of Central Intelligence, from September 1973 to 76. David Atlee Phillips and Ray Klein, both deputy DCIs. So what did Colby say? He said, it's acceptable to assassinate a president or a high-level official when he's a tyrant. What is considered a tyrant then? Anybody who violates what the Pope really stands for, or the Catholic Church. Interesting. Okay, all out of time. See you tomorrow on the Investigative Journal.
The book of Revelation says, the spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ. This is at the very heart of FirstAmendmentRadio.com. In that spirit, we have created the Prophecy Reality News app for all of your mobile devices, streaming First Amendment Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone, absolutely free. Get the Prophecy Reality News app installed today so you can listen to First Amendment Radio wherever you are. The Prophecy